Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. Today's a really exciting episode. I get to chat with the infamous Bungay Stanier, who is the founder of Box of Crayons. Now, his company is known for teaching like 10-minute coaching to busy leaders and managers so they can build better teams and more effective organizational cultures. And you're going to hear a phenomenal accent. He left Australia 26 years ago to be a Rhodes Scholar at the Oxford University, where he always says his only significant achievement was falling in love with a Canadian. What can I say? We're hard to resist. And now that's why he lives here in Toronto. After being spent much time in London and Boston, he's definitely a worldly person itself. Now, he has written so many books. And I have to tell you that his latest one that happened to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Coaching Habit, has sold over 500,000 copies and has been praised as one of the best business books that make people laugh. Like, I have to tell you guys, his book is so phenomenal that it's one of my staples that I use. And I refer to it throughout the whole entire podcast. Now, he always says that balancing out these moments of success, he was banned from high school, his high school graduation for the balloon incident. Oh my. And was sued by one of his law school lecturers for defamation. And he's published a piece of writing that was a Harlequin romance short story, The Mail Delivery. The guy is not boring, and he's so phenomenal beyond belief. And not only does he share about the best 7 coaching questions, we talk about what exactly is ghost coaching, the difference between bad, good, and great work, and how you can leverage that. But the benefits that he gives, it talks about the benefits of giving less advice and staying curious longer. This is a really fantastic episode. You're going to learn a lot. We jammed a lot of amazing topics in a very short amount of time. So I can't wait to hear what you think about it. And in fact, Michael has actually been so kind to send you all that give away our listeners a book, one of his copies of his book. So all you've got to do is send me an email and answer this question. Out of this episode, what was the most useful for you? And this is not just open to Canadian. This is open to anybody around the world, all of our listeners around the world. So he's giving a book to our listeners. So just send me an email and answer the question. What was the most useful piece of advice for you in this episode? And I can't wait to hear your responses and replies. And these are really great books to have. You're going to want them forever and to pass it over to different generations. In fact, one of my dear friends, her youngest daughter, who happens to be 15 years old, passed Michael's book over to her to read, and she was thrown for a loop that her child had actually given this book and as saying, this is so good. So anyways, I can't wait for you to hear it. Check it out. Welcome, Michael. This is such an absolute honor to have you. I am a huge raving fan of yours. I think I've read most of your books, and I can't tell you, they have become part of my leadership closet, and I use it all the time. I have to say, The Coaching Habit is so one of my favorites, but the Do More Great Work is just as good too. So you make my brain turn into a big puzzle. You make me think more but do less, and I love that. I love that you do that for me.
Thank you. I mean, trying to make people think a bit, trying to make them act a bit, trying to make them have a bit of fun on the journey is definitely part of it. So I'm glad you're finding that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the big things that I found about The Coaching Habit, it was such a radical and surprising idea to me that a busy manager only needs 7 good questions and they can really transform their leadership game. And I thought, 7? Like only 7? How is that possible? So can you tell us a little bit about how did this all come about and about the 7 questions? Because it's just so amazing.
Well, look, one of the philosophies I love comes from a quote from, I can't remember his name now, but an American judge on their Supreme Court. And he said, look, I don't care about simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give anything for simplicity on the other side of complexity. And in the teachings that I do, I try and strive for that simplicity. I think so often we overcomplicate things. And if we can make things feel simple and practical and doable, then that's what I'm about. And honestly, for most normal people, coaching is a little bit weird. I mean, some people are being traumatized by a life coach who had to overappreciate them, and some people have been traumatized by a sports coach who yelled at them. And for me, I think coaching is a very powerful leadership behavior to get the best out of people, get the best out of yourself, to have more impact in the work you're doing. So part of the question I was asking myself is, what's the least I could teach people? What's the least people need to have the most impact in the work they did? And, I played around with it quite a bit, but in the end, I reckon 7 good questions. It doesn't solve every problem every time, but it takes you a long way down the path towards being a more effective manager and leader and human being.
No, I love it, because also these 7 questions that you have actually helps me with my management consulting practice and business as well when I'm talking to my clients, to really understand what's kind of going on and to kind of really untap that and get them to get out of that their comfort zone and to really open up. And that's why I thought this book, like, you've got these questions, you can use it for so many purposes in life, from sales, business development, consulting, leadership. It's just such a great idea and concept.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've been a consultant in my time, and I love, for instance, Peter Block's work on flawless consulting, and his whole piece is, look, spend less time telling people what to do, spend more time asking good questions. So even though the book, The Coaching Habit, is written with primarily a kind of busy manager or busy leader as its audience, as its readership, really, I reckon if you interact with other human beings in your life, learning to be more coach-like, which in the end is, can you be curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? Being more coach-like can make a difference for everybody.
No, that's amazing. But that curious a little longer. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to put it bluntly, most of us are advice-giving maniacs. I mean, it takes us no time before, as soon as somebody starts talking and telling us about a situation, we've got the solution in our brain and we want to tell it to people. And what I've just discovered is people's advice isn't nearly as good as they think it is. First of all, quite often the advice they have isn't solving the wrong problem. Secondly, the advice they have isn't actually that good a solution. And thirdly, people prefer to figure this stuff out themselves and come up with their own ideas and their own advice. And so, again, not saying never give advice, but I am saying that, using questions is a way you can just slow down the natural trained habits you have to give advice and leap into action and ask some good questions instead.
No, I love that. So, out of curiosity, out of all 7 questions, which one is the best coaching question?
That's a great question. And let me ask you that. You've read the book, you've seen the 7 questions. Which is your favorite coaching question of those 7?
I think it is the "and what else." I think that's
that's an awesome question. And in the book we say it's the best coaching question in the world because and it's a bold claim. I know it's a bold claim, but for us, and what else is it comes with an insight that a person's answer to your first question is never their only answer, and it's rarely their best answer. So what this allows you to do is kind of get more bang for your buck and get a little deeper into what other things are they thinking about in terms of response. But also, and what else is a really great self-management tool, because if we're trying to slow down the rush to advice, asking and what else is one way of controlling what we call your advice monster. And we say that everybody's got an inner advice monster. It's just waiting to leap into action and try and kind of solve the problem, save the day. And we just want to tame your advice monster. So, and what else can be a really powerful tool to help with that?
Yeah. And the other question that really caught me off guard, actually, I should have said there's a couple that was a tie, which is crazy when there's only 7 questions. And I'm going to tell you 3 of them were a big tie, right. Was if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? And I thought,
Right. Well, when you think about innovation and you think about the challenges that brings with it, so much of what great innovation is around being clear on what the no's are so you can say yes to the stuff that really matters. So in the book, we call it the strategy question. But, in my past, I've worked as basically an innovation consultant. And I know that, for instance, part of what makes innovation work, and it sounds paradoxical, but I'm sure you've covered this in other conversations, the clearer you can be around the brief, the challenge, what's the problem you're trying to solve. In other words, the stricter the parameters you set yourself, the stronger and better able you are to generate and innovate around that. And that what are you saying yes to? And if you're saying yes to that, what must you say no to? It helps with that.
Yeah. And I also found it made it even more transparent that, if people are trying to understand what that scope and the parameters are, by understanding what that no part is, it really you understand a lot more clear what that yes meant.
Exactly. So it gets into opportunity cost, because every time you say yes, you are ruling out a bunch of other things that you can't do that might be better things for you to do. However you measure that, whether it's you make more money, whether you more have impact, whether you have more joy, doesn't really matter. But making clear what the consequences of making the choice are, make it harder to make casual choices that aren't as strong as they might be.
I love it. I so love it. Now, there are so many busy managers out there. And then I heard you have this really cool, interesting concept. But coaching the ghost, I think that's what it was called.
Right. So you're right. This is a kind of deeper dive into what gets in the way of people coaching. And coaching the ghost is, let's say you come, we're having a conversation, and you go, Michael, I'm having this real trouble with Jonathan. And I go, oh, yeah, Jonathan, I know about Jonathan, but tell me, what's going on with Jonathan? And you're like, well, Jonathan, blah, 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 and Jonathan, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's terrible. What else about Jonathan? Blah, 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 blah. And we spend a lot of time talking about Jonathan. And unfortunately, Jonathan isn't actually the issue. I can't coach Jonathan remotely through a third person. I'm coaching you. And what I need to talk about is not what's the problem with Jonathan, but what's the challenge about Jonathan for you. And I need to make the conversation about how you're dealing with Jonathan, not about Jonathan himself. And of course, Jonathan can be Joanna. Joanna can be a project alphabet. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's about understanding that when you're being more coach-like, you're helping the person you're having a conversation with. And by conversation, just to be clear, you can do this by text or IM or email as well. But you're actually dealing with the person you're interacting with, not the issue that they're dealing with. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It's so interesting because it really gets things more tactical and concrete into something that's actionable and solvable, as opposed to, just venting a frustration that just goes nowhere and just spirals out of control. So I thought that was such a fabulous point when I read that. I was like, coaching the ghost. I think that's really, people don't realize that we do that, and we do it by accident. But you can turn those unproductive conversations into something much more productive.
Nice. Yeah, exactly right.
So I love that. Now, out of curiosity, notice I'm using one of your
I noticed that. I like that. Yeah, it's for the people listening in who don't know this, one of the tips we give in the book is that a very simple way to soften a question, to make it land with kind of a little more in a way that's a little more accessible, is to start every phrase out of curiosity. So to show you the difference is like, you could ask somebody, so, okay, you're dealing with this. What's difficult about this for you? And that's a great question, but quite confronting. But when you go, so out of curiosity, what's difficult about this for you? It just makes having the right answer feel slightly less pressured, and allows people a bit more freedom in terms of how they show up. But anyway, we interrupted. So what's the question?
No, but I love that you did that, because I was going to try to explain that, and I can never do it as elegantly as you. That's for sure. That's for sure. But out of curiosity, I get a lot of emails from listeners, and they really feel like they're stuck in a rut. whether it's their career, their
Mhm.
job, their passion, their curiosity, whatever it is. Do you have any tips for them, or should they be going and getting a coach?
I don't think that you need as an immediate response to go, I've got to get a coach. And at the same time, if you can find a great coach and it works for you financially in terms of times and how you're willing to commit, that can be really powerful. But there's 1,000 ways that you can get unstuck. You can just find an accountability partner and say, hey, you're stuck at work, I'm stuck at work. Let's have a coffee every Monday morning and figure out what we're going to do about this. Or you can hire a coach, or you can read any number of books. Do More Great Work might be one example of that, and go, I'm going to work through this book and I'm going to make progress and I'm going to figure this stuff out myself. I'm both a big champion for hiring a coach, but also I realize that to be put it bluntly, having a coach is a luxury, and it's a luxury that you have to have a certain amount of income and a certain amount of access to actually be able to afford and bring on. So, the answer is, maybe, maybe both. Hire a coach if you can, if you think that's useful, if you can find a great coach. Don't hire a coach if you can't, but there are different ways to make movement. Part of it just comes from your commitment to say, look, I'm not going to tolerate this any further. I'm just going to get going and make a difference here.
No, that's really great advice, because that's the first thing that they actually jump into that solution as, I need a coach really quickly. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring that up and ask you, like, does everybody should quickly go and get a coach, or is there other things that they can do to kind of untap some of these pieces and uncover some of these areas of where they're feeling stuck in a rut and what that really means?
Yeah, sure. So you're feeling stuck, and it could be you're stuck at work or stuck at home, or just feeling angry or frustrated or sad or kind of discombobulated in some way. And often you're like, something's off, but you're not quite sure what. And the question, what's the real challenge here for you? That's question number 3 in the book. Is a really good way potentially of actually going, let me give myself some time to dig into this and get new insights as to what's really going on. So you can take your friend out for coffee and say, friend, ask me what's the real challenge here for you, and then ask me, and what else is a challenge, and then ask me, and what else is a challenge, and then ask me, okay, so what's the real challenge here for you? And they'll kind of accidentally coach you. Or maybe you want to journal and just go, so this is how I'm feeling, so what's the real challenge here for me? And you can spend 5 minutes just writing in the morning and see what shows up for you. But it's a really great way to try and get into the heart of, right, this is the key issue. And once you see the key issue, solutions begin to show up, and you get some new insight as to what you could do to shift things.
Oh, that's so amazing. And now I feel like I should be talking to myself in a mirror and just keep prompting to it, so I get that be able to see that transparency and just keep myself accountable and just keep drilling till I understand what's kind of going on. I love that. You know what else I loved is that you brought up that book about Do More Great Work and Stop at the Busy Work. Okay, that book also blew my mind. Like, I don't know, Michael, if you get this reaction from most people, but your books really always truly resonate with me. Like, they're so phenomenal. But can we talk a little bit about this book, like Do More Great Work? Like, where did that come from?
Well, there's a saying out in the world, and I can't remember who said this, but the saying I love is, inspiration is when your past suddenly makes sense. And there was a time when I was like, look, I know a bunch of things about a bunch of things, but I didn't really have a hook or a focus to the work I was doing. But then a friend of mine, Kate, sent me this 1-page photocopy of the front page of a book called Art is Work by Milton Glaser, who's a graphic designer. And he shared a model, which I kind of took and adapted and changed a bit. But the very simple model is this. Everything that you do, not just work, but in your life, falls into one of 3 different buckets. It's either going to feel like bad work for you, which is time-wasting, life-sucking type of work. There's good work, which I think is best described as your job description. And, whether or not you have a formal job, we all have a job description. You might be a parent, you might be a I'm not sure, a podcast person, you might be a CEO, but you kind of got to, this is what we expect you to do. And then great work, I define as the work that has more impact and the work that has more meaning. And for almost everybody, what you're looking to do in this world is see if you can get a little more great work into your life and less of all the other stuff, less bad work and actually less good work as well. So you get to kind of, when you ask most people, hey, how are you spending your time at the moment? And let's say they draw a circle and divide it into three, so they kind of measure how much bad, how much good, and how much great work is in their lives. Well, most people go, look, I've got some great work, I just don't have enough. And part of the exercise, the point of that book, Do More Great Work, it's 15 very specific exercises to help you understand what great work is, define what great work might be for you now, and actually figure out how to start and continue and sustain doing more great work as a result of that.
No, it's so cool because that whole thing about understanding what great work is and what means meaningful to you, it really helped with me to understand what I wanted more of and what I was more curious about. And it actually led me to other types of areas that I may not have ventured into. So I have to say thank you so much for this book, because it really helped me focus a lot more differently about what I defined as great work. And it's a lot more clarity for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So is there any other advice that you might provide out there to our aspiring or budding innovators out there?
Well, part of my stand on the coaching habit is give less advice. So I'm always wary about advice. And I think one of the things I might offer up as advice is that, which is, it can be easy for you to go, look, somebody else has the answer out there. I'm on this quest to figure out how to solve things. What's the advice other people have for me? And I would just offer up that sometimes, not always, but sometimes seeking out and trying to get other people's advice is a way of deflecting from you actually going, what's my real challenge and what am I going to do about it and how am I going to take this on? At a certain point, you have to move away from collecting advice and you have to move into taking responsibility to take your best guess and move things on. There is almost never a perfect, right, easy answer out there for the challenge you're facing. You would have discovered it otherwise. So at a certain point, you have to take your best guess and go, right, here's what I think the answer is. I've done a bit of due diligence. I've had some different perspectives. Let's take it on and see where we go with it.
Oh, that's so brilliant. That is so brilliant. I love that. So I know we're coming short to time and I just have 3 final questions to ask. Besides writing all your amazing books, is there an actual favorite book that really resonated with you, that it's your own personal favorite?
Yeah. I have a bunch of books that I love and have influenced me in different ways in different times. They're not always traditional business books either. Sometimes it's just a reminder of, this is just a great book and you live a good life. It's a reminder of that. So the book I would suggest, I'd offer up as a book that I loved, and you might love it too, is by a writer called Bill Bryson. He's a very funny writer, often writes travel books. But a number of years ago, he wrote A Short History of Nearly Everything. And it is a book about science. And his whole thing is, look, science is cool. It's amazing. And the stories of how he figured stuff out are amazing. And because most of us have been vaguely traumatized by science class in high school, we kind of think of science as tedious, boring, and not at all interesting. And Bill Bryson writes this book, lots of short chapters, lots of great stories that, for me anyway, just made me go, it is basically miraculous that we get to live in this planet at this time. The way technology works, the way we understand the universe, the quirks in the universe that just allow life to exist in this form on this planet, they're amazing. So I think Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, is a great recommendation.
Oh, wonderful. I'm going to totally pick that up because, I'm totally inspired by that. And I love that you're a proud Canadian. So is there a favorite Canadian hotspot, hideaway, city, festival, restaurant that you would love to share with our listeners out here?
Yeah, so I live in Toronto, and I live in Roncesvalles in Toronto, so kind of inner West End. And the Roncesvalles High Park area is kind of cool and booming and becoming increasingly hip over the years. So I'm going to give you two Toronto restaurants. One is my local pizza place. It's called Defina Pizza, and it's on Roncesvalles. And they just do fabulous pizzas, and they're not only great pizzas, but just lovely people as well. Their pizzas have won best pizzas at the kind of International Pizza Fair in Las Vegas for a couple of years. I mean, who even knew something like that existed? But apparently it does. And then the other restaurant, which is a bit more posh, a bit more kind of upper end, is a restaurant downtown Toronto, kind of close to the TIFF Film Festival hub where that's happening at the moment. And it's called Byblos, Byblos. And it is let's say, Middle Eastern style restaurant. And honestly, the way that place smells and the food there, they kind of do mezze style, so lots of small dishes, also equally fabulous. So that would be my two top tips.
I love it. Okay, I know where I'm going to be eating this weekend, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Michael, how can our listeners connect with you?
Sure. So three websites that they can check out. If they're interested in learning more about the book, thecoachinghabit.com is a website. You can download part of the book and download a bunch of other resources and videos and interviews and stuff. If you happen to be interested in what we teach and sell at Box of Crayons, which is training programs for managers and leaders to be more coach-like, then boxofcrayons.com. And if you just want to find out more about me, then michaelbungaystanier.com. That's my full name. When I got married, I took my wife's name, which is why I have a two-part surname. michaelbungaystanier.com. You can go there.
Fantastic. I'm going to put that all in the links. Thank you so much for your time. You are an absolute
My
treat.
pleasure. It's so nice to be on the podcast with you. Thanks for having me along.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. And next week, I got another really fun episode. You'll be surprised at the topics we're going to cover. But anyways, in the meantime, you don't have to wait till next week to connect with us. You can connect with us always on all the different social media links. You can even send us a review. That's another great place to give feedback. And of course, our new newsletter that has tons of new golden nuggets and of course, discounts galore. Actually, our tools section of the website also have it. And please feel free to nominate another innovator out there. And I can't wait to talk to you next week.